Everybody knows you need high-rated recruits if you're going to win in college football, right? Well, how has Pitt done when it comes to signing those 4- and 5-star prospects over the last, 20 or so years? Plus, what's the latest with Blake Hinson as he gets closer and closer to that deadline and whether he's going to go to the NBA or come back to Pitt for another season? All that and more on today's Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Glad to be hanging out with you this morning or today, throughout the day, whenever you're watching this video right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what we always ask you to do? Like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. The like button's down there, over there somewhere. Subscribe button's right down here. People sometimes go in the comments and say, come on, get to the important stuff. I'm tired of hearing you talk about liking and subscribing. Well, if you would just like and subscribe, I wouldn't have to talk about this. Same thing goes for Panther-Lair.com. You go over to the website, join the website, be a part of the website, talk on the message boards, hang out with other Pitt fans. I wouldn't have to talk to you about it during these Morning Pitt videos. But there's a lot of you out there who are still not checking out Panther-Lair.com, so go do it. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's Tuesday, May 30th, which means we are, depending on when you're watching this video, we release it usually around 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning. So let's just count it from there. We're about 24, 36, just shy of 41 hours away from the deadline on when Blake Hinson needs to decide if he's going to stay in the NBA draft or come back to Pitt, retain his eligibility, and play one more season with the Panthers. 11:59 p.m. tomorrow night, Wednesday night, May 31st, is when Hinson has to have that decision made, when he has to at least notify the NBA. He could leave us all hanging, swinging in the wind for a long time before he announces anything publicly. I don't think he's going to do that. I think we'll hear an announcement from Hinson today or tomorrow, maybe late in the day tomorrow. But he needs to inform the NBA by tomorrow night at 11:59 p.m. So that's the deadline we're looking at here. No real concrete info. Everything I'm hearing is that there remains confidence about Hinson coming back. It seems like the most likely outcome, even more so than when Justin Champagnie was going through the same test the waters process a few years ago. I think there was a feeling out of Pitt a few years ago that Champagnie probably looked at the situation and said, I just had a couple 2020 games. I just averaged a double-double in the ACC. I'm not sure what more I could really do here. I've sort of maxed out what I can do in college, had some knee injuries. Maybe it's time to go to the NBA. And so it made sense. And I think when he announced that he was going to go through the draft process and retain eligibility, I think a lot of people at Pitt were sort of thinking, yeah, he's probably not coming back. I don't get that sense now when I talk to different people around the program or close to the program. I get the sense that there's a feeling that it's pretty likely that Blake Hinson will return. We'll find out for sure, though, I think, like I say, either today or tomorrow. And it probably goes without saying how important it would be for Pitt to bring Blake Hinson back. You get your leading scorer, your leading rebounder back. We spend so much time talking about the impact of Jalen Lowe, Carlton Carrington, and Ish Leggett, and Zach Austin, and Dior Johnson, and the improvement of the Diaz-Graham twins, and Federico. There's a bright burning sun at the center of it all, and it's Blake Hinson. And Blake Hinson needs to be the core of this team, the nuclear reactor at the center of it all, the X factor, as he was last year, and thrust into even more of a star role, depending on his teammates. Of course, his teammates are going to have to help as well. He's not going to be out there doing it on his own, but he's going to be he's the one that this whole thing is going to be sort of built around. And if you do have to take that out of the mix, if somehow he pulls a surprise and decides to go, it will be a real blow to those plans and what I think Pitt was building toward and has been building toward with everything they've done this offseason, and probably a fair amount of the optimism, not all of it, but a fair amount of the optimism for the coming season. We'll take a real blow if Blake Hinson does not return. But like I say, I don't think that's the expectation right now. An hour from now, an hour from when you're watching this video or listening to this podcast, he might announce that he's going, and then we have a whole new topic to discuss tomorrow. My hope is that he announces something today, so we do have that to discuss tomorrow, but we'll see how it works out with Blake Hinson. A week ago or 2 weeks ago, somewhere around there, I talked about Pitt's history with 2-star recruits. The football on the football side now. Switching over to football since we got all our football pictures up. I talked about Pitt's history with 2-star recruits and kind of went down how many 2-stars and no stars they've signed since the class of 2002. That's as far back as the Rivals database goes. And I kind of counted them all up. I think it was 112 2-stars. And we found a lot of guys out of that group who, I mean, we made a pretty good 2-deep, if not a 2-deep, a full 11 on 11, particularly along the defensive line, where you've got like Greg Romius and Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver, a pretty loaded defensive end group. Some pretty good safeties back there, guys like Jason Hendricks playing at safety, the corners with Dane Jackson. I forget who the other starter was with Jackson, but I mean, it's a good group. It's a strong group on both sides of the ball. It made a pretty good offensive line out of 2-star recruits. But I wanted to look at the other end of the spectrum. Somebody actually brought this up in a question for the mailbag, either last week or the week before. And I thought that's a really interesting question. Let's do some research and not just use it in the mailbag, but use it for a separate Morning Pitt episode. And somebody asked, well, what about the other end of the spectrum? You counted up the 112 2-stars and no stars from the class of 2002 through the class of 2023. What about the 4-star and 5-star guys? What about all the ones that Pitt has signed over those years? How many have there been, and how have they done? So for comparison, by the numbers, like I say, they signed 112 2-stars or no stars from 2022 through 2023. So that's, 22 recruiting classes. Over that same time, 112 of those, they signed 67 4-stars and 5-stars. Since 2002. 67. Now, every name on here, I can't imagine that there are many names on this list, and I'm not going to read all 67 names. As I kind of looked at the standouts, the contributors, I got a little over 30 when it comes to guys who made an impact at this level. Plus another 7 or so who are still on the current team. 8 really, if you want to include Javonte Royal, but 7 or so who are on the current team and show promise, I think. And so we don't want to render a judgment on them just quite yet, but about 32 or so guys, 30 to 32 out of those first 60, I guess, 4-star and 5-star recruits that Pitt signed, about half of them, I think, made a positive impact. And that could range from a guy like Larry Fitzgerald, as a Maxwell Award winner, Heisman Trophy runner-up, a Dorrit Dickerson, who was an All-American, a LaShawn McCoy, who obviously went on to have a great career, a Jonathan Baldwin, who was a first-round draft pick, obviously Jordan Whitehead, Damar Hamlin having very good NFL careers, Tyler Boyd having a very good NFL career. It could range from those guys down to Amir Watts. 4-star recruit, played a lot, starter, not really a big contributor. Chad Voitin, multi-year starter. Started all of 2014, started the first couple games of 2015, came in and basically won the Pizza Bowl in 2013. Do you look back and say that he lived up to his 4-star hype? It's a tough sell. But he is a guy who contributed. He is a guy who played a lot. Conrad Collins played a lot just as a fullback. So there's a limited, level of contributions there. Tommy Duhart only had as a JUCO prospect, as a junior college player coming into Pitt. As a high schooler, I think he was only a 3-star, but he couldn't make the grade, so he went to JUCO and he came to Pitt as a 4-star JUCO prospect and recovered a fumble in that 13-9 game. So maybe that alone makes him live up to his 4-star caliber. I mean, there are definitely guys who played up to that level. John Malecki played up to that level. Jeff Ota was great for 2 years and played himself into a first-round draft pick spot. Tyler Palco was a 4-star prospect. Dorian Johnson and Alex Buxer were 4-star prospects. I thought Adam Bisnawadi might have been as well. Maybe he was only a 3-star. Might have gotten that one, but Jordan Whitehead, like I mentioned. Jonathan Baldwin had a good career. Lucas Nix, Jared Hawley had a good career. They've gotten good 4-stars. They just haven't gotten many. And there's something I always wonder about when it comes to the 4-star prospects that Pitt lands. because sometimes they sort of feel like a Michael Salahuddin, or a Naquan Brown from a recent class. Guys who were 4-star prospects, rated high early on, and even had committable opportunities. At Salahuddin, I think, was committed to USC. Naquan Brown was committed to LSU. You remember George Hill a few years before that had been committed to Ohio State. And they all end up decommitting either by their own choice or by suggestion. And Pitt ends up getting them late in the process. And you wonder sometimes about, were they overrated? And part of that comes down to what their careers ended up being. And it's not fair to George Hill. He was medically disqualified, so he never had an opportunity to show what he could do. But Michael Salahuddin, never really lived up to it. I think I know he transferred. I forget what he transferred to, but I feel like he might have even moved to defensive back. Naquan Brown transferred, and I don't really feel like he was making a huge contribution. You wonder if these guys were maybe a little bit overrated. And I don't want to paint with a broad brush here, but it does feel like sometimes Pitt ends up with 4 stars that probably could have maybe been dropped to a 3, and their college careers bear it out. Now, a guy like Damar Hamlin, I think, lived up to his ranking. Jordan Whitehead lived up to his ranking. Tyler Boyd and Dorian Johnson lived up to their rankings. I mean, Dorian Johnson was a starter during his freshman year. He got killed during his freshman year. He did not play well. It was a trial by fire his freshman year of 2013, but he was a big part of that offensive line in 2016 that helped create a record-setting offense with Matt Canada as the offensive coordinator. Alex Bookser was a big part of it. Darren Hall is an interesting guy. 4-star prospect, 4-star running back. Has a record-breaking day at Duke in 2017 when he's a junior. And then as in 2018, along with Quadri Olson, they both go for 1,000 yards. Did Darren Hall live up to his 4-star rating? He had a 1,000-yard season, which, that's close to a 4-star accomplishment, I would say. He set a Pitt record for the longest run, in school history. I think that, that's seems like a 4-star accomplishment, but he really had one great year. Looking through a few other guys, Nate Byam was a 4-star prospect. I think he was a really good player at Pitt. Did he live up to his 4-star billing? And that's not to diminish what Nate Byam did at Pitt. I think he was a really good player at Pitt. Was he a 4-star? Tyler Palko, like I mentioned, was a 4-star. David Abdul. Do you remember David Abdul, the kicker, was a 4-star prospect back when rivals would make kickers 4-star prospect. I don't know how that happened. I don't think it happens anymore. I think kickers are pretty much, the best of the best. Might be a 3-star, but he counts as one of Pitt's 67 4- and 5-star prospects. Now, a lot of these guys busted out. I mentioned a few there, like Salahuddin or a Naquan Brown. George Hill never makes it medically disqualified. And I think some of those guys who bust out, you're looking at about a 50% hit rate, which is still better than the hit rate when we talked about the 2-stars a week ago. That was down in the, I forget, it was in the 20% range. I forget what the exact number ended up being, but not nearly what the hit rate is for 4- and 5-star prospects. I think when you look at, a sample size of 22 recruiting classes, that's what we're talking about, 2002 through 2023. Look at 22 recruiting classes, 67 4- and 5-star prospects signed. You're averaging about 3 per year. You're hitting on about 1.5 of those 3 per year. For every Damar Hamlin in the class of 2016, there was a Reuben Flowers, and there was a Kazon Pugh, and there was George Hill, who didn't make it academic or medically. So you sort of have that balance, or not that balance, but you do have the guys who just don't make it, and that's probably the case. I think if you look throughout the Rivals 250 in any given year, I think if you look at how many of the top 250 prospects in the country make it and how many don't, it's probably on that 50% marker, more or less. Could you build a team out of these 4-star guys? You've got some offensive linemen here with Jeff Otah, John Malecki, Chris Jacobson, Dorian Johnson, and Alex Bookser. You've got an offensive line right there. You can make Jacobson, your center. You've got a quarterback. You've got two in Tyler Palko and Chad Voitek. Probably you would take Tyler out of the situation. You go for that. Running backs, you've got LaShawn McCoy and Darren Hall with Conrad Collins as a fullback. That's pretty good. You take those guys. Your receivers will be okay. Larry Fitzgerald and Tyler Boyd. I think you'd be all right with that group. And your tight ends with Nate Byam and Doran Dickerson. You got a pretty good offense. You got a better offense out of the 4 and 5 star guys than you have out of the 2-star guys. That 2-star offense that we put together wasn't. I don't know. It seemed to lack a little pizzazz. On the defensive side, it's kind of interesting. I mean, you don't have, whereas, TJ Clemmings was also a 4-star guy. He ended up on the offensive side of the ball. Remember, he was in the same class with Brian Murphy, and Brian Murphy didn't make it, but Clemmings did and ended up playing really well as an offensive lineman. The defensive side, when we looked at the 2-stars and the no-stars, you had Weaver and Jones and Romeus to pick from. There aren't really many defensive ends. I mean, as I glance down the list, there aren't any defensive ends. You got a couple D tackles. Tommy Duhart, like I mentioned. Kanan Mosley-Smith, coming out of prep school, was rated as a 4-star prospect. Amir Watts, who I said. So you got some ends there. You have a couple linebackers. Todd Thomas was a 4-star prospect coming out of prep. Not coming out of Beaver Falls, but when he went to prep school for a year, he came out as a 4-star. Nicholas Grigsby is an interesting guy. He was a 4-star prospect. Played a lot of games. Started a lot of games. Did he live up to his 4-star billing? When I say that name, do you immediately think that was a star on the field? I don't know. But you could put him out there with Todd Thomas. Dan Mason was a 4-star. You could make a case for him, making the cut here. Obviously, his career cut a bit short on numerous occasions by injuries as well as some other issues. Defensive backs, you don't really have many corners. You got Jordan Whitehead and DeMar Hamlin who can play safety for you. But as I glance through the list, Aaron Berry, I guess, was a 4-star. Another guy that played a lot, started a lot of games, multi-year starter. And you say, well, did he live up to his 4-star billing? I mean, he was part of the 2009 team. And that's probably the other thing that's really interesting to me here. And probably the last thing I mentioned. You don't find a lot of these 4-star guys when you look at the roster that won the ACC in 2021. I segue into that from Aaron Berry because he was on the 2009 team that won 10 games, right? So Conrad Collins was on that team. Nate Byam was on that team. Doran Dickerson, Aaron Berry, John Malecki, Jared Hawley, Jonathan Baldwin, and Ray Graham of 4-star guys. Those guys were on that team. The 2021 team, though, didn't really feature. I mean, unless I'm missing some obvious option as I look through the list here, in terms of contributors and guys who were a big part of it. I mean, Deion Hayes was on that roster. Rashad Battle was on that team. I think Elliot Donald and Nakai Johnson, I think, were the class of 2021, so they were on that team. But not like contributors. You know what I mean? DeMar Hamlin was gone. Paris Ford was gone. Amir Watts was gone. And so you look through this list, and that team was built. The strengths of that team were the offensive line. I guess Marcus Minor had been a 4-star prospect coming out of high school, but he came in as a transfer. You're talking about high school guys here. Kenny Pickett wasn't a 4-star. Jordan Addison wasn't a 4-star. Izzy Benacando wasn't a 4-star. None of those defensive linemen, were 4-stars coming out of high school. None of the linebackers, the DBs. I mean, Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill and all those big plays. Damari Mathis and Marquez Williams. I mean, none of those guys were 4- and 5-star prospects. And it's interesting because, they've gotten these guys sort of, like I say, about 3 per year over the last 22 years. And we could probably narrow it down to Narduzzi and Pat Narduzzi and his staff and the numbers that they've gotten. But that 2021 team, that ACC championship team, wasn't really built with 4- and 5-star prospects. So it's kind of interesting to see that. And I think that probably backs up a lot of what we would assume or what we would know. But you'd think there'd at least be a few of those guys who would highlight the list, like in 2009 when they had all those 4-stars that really kind of came together and made it happen. But you don't really see that on the ACC championship team. So I thought that was interesting. We can post this full list on Panther-Lair.com on the message boards. Just remind me at some point today. And I will put the list at least of the contributing guys and also a link to all 67 of the 4- and 5-star prospects. But that's that's it for today. We're going to be on Blake Hinson watch today and tomorrow, and then the official visits start on Thursday. So we're going to have a lot to talk about over the next few days. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, to never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content, and then check out the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope you had a good long weekend. You're ready to attack the week. Have a great Tuesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow with the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.